Hello, welcome to IABC TV. I'm Allison Mackenzie, ABC, President of IABC Calgary. Today we're discussing crisis communications. In this module, we'll be looking at crisis communications and the importance of getting it right in a pressure-filled environment. During the past year, we've been inundated daily with news of erupting crises on all fronts. Blue chip companies such as Toyota and BP, organizations such as the Calgary Zoo and the Calgary Stampede, institutions such as the Catholic Church, and even governments such as the government of Greece. All of these continue to face the relentless and unmerciful media glare caused by a crisis. So, are corporate crises increasing in frequency? And if so, what does this mean for communicators? To answer these questions, we talked with John Larsen, ABC, Principal of Corpen Group, a critical communications firm located in Calgary.
Crises have been increasing, and not just have crises been increasing, but our perception of what is a crisis has also changed, and that's a function of a variety of things. Number one, the value proposition. People view things differently now than they used to. We look through a lens where we say this is a crisis situation, whereas a few years ago we may not have interpreted it the same way. Values continue to migrate, continue to change, so that's part of it. Second thing is what I'd call accessibility. People have access to so many more modes and mediums of actually seeing a crisis, social media being the big one, the 24-hour news cycle, all of those sorts of accessibility items. And the third one is regulation, really. We live in an environment that is much more regulated, and those regulatory standards are much higher. So what could pass as not being a crisis from a regulatory perspective 10 years ago simply is not the case anymore. That is now a crisis, and organizations have to respond accordingly. There are a lot of things to consider when you're dealing with crises. I mean, essentially, you're working in a different environment, so oftentimes your communications has to be formulated a lot differently. We can't build up the story, if you will. We don't have the luxury of an extended narrative, so we have to get to the point very quickly. And one of the key things that organizations need to think about when they do that is really be emotive in the language that they use. There's an adage out there in crisis communications that says that in times of crisis and uncertainty and fear, people want to know that you care more than they care what you know. And oftentimes as organizations, we sometimes make the mistake of trying to get out in front of things with the facts, when people don't want to see the facts right away. They want to see that you care about the situation, that you care about them. Thankfully, most people haven't been exposed to a lot of crisis situations. Some organizations may have had one or two instances where it was very intense, and people have certainly learned from that. But what happens in times of crisis is it can be really valuable to have comparative examples that can be brought to the forefront, to have industry best practices by people that do it on a daily basis. So that's where that niche service is incredibly valuable. When everybody's watching you, when your call for accountability is exceptionally high. The other component to this is capacity. So it has nothing to do with competence of the communicator within an organization, but it has to do with capacity to be able to support that team. And if somebody's reaching out for that capacity, ideally they're doing so with somebody that understands the dynamics of crisis communications, that works in crisis communications on a regular basis to help support their team if it goes on for days or, heavens forbid, even weeks.